You're listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, we'd like to ask you to leave a rating for us on wherever you get your podcasts from, and some feedback if you could, and share Range Minded podcasts with everybody you know to help us make better content for you. This is episode 124 of Range Minded, where we talk with our special guest Nick Coffer about what you can do if you cannot afford a firearm. Turns out there's a lot more options than you'd think than just buying a brand new firearm or buying something maybe of a less lethal option. Got a lot of good points to consider in this one, so we hope you enjoy episode 124 of Range Minded, and thank you for listening to the options you have if you can't afford a firearm. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long and I am joined by...
Hey guys, it's Steve.
The one and only.
Chair.
And for the first time, Nick Coffer.
Not for the first, fourth, fifth time, something like that.
Oh yeah, I have been here before.
Yeah, man. We're always happy to have you.
You've been trying to forget.
I just thought that was a dream because I listened to you guys so much.
Oh, do you?
Or a nightmare. Man, if you hear our voices all the time, that's bad.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah, so my neighbor, we were talking yesterday. I told you I had a meeting, right? And so I was talking to my neighbor, and he works for a 3-letter agency, does some stuff.
Really?
With some stuff. And we were talking about podcasts, and my wife brought it up. Says, yeah, he did something about the podcast, right? And he's like, oh, you have a podcast? And I'm like, yeah.
How come he did? How come he just now found out?
I don't know. I'm terrible at marketing, I suppose.
I guess it's the best kept secret in the gun world.
It's okay, Steve. I'm going to help you spread the word.
There you go.
Hallelujah.
Thank God for Nick Coffer.
He's gonna proselyte for us.
Yes.
I actually have to give you a shout out, Nick. I appreciate your hooking me up with a very nice holster the other day.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, I forgot that I did that.
For the 19?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was for the first Glock.
Yeah, it's
nice.
It was a great welcome to Glock present, so I appreciate it.
Well, hopefully it's working out well for you.
Yeah, it's super comfortable. I love it. So thank you.
I was talking about the Glock.
You might as well have a great holster for a fantastic gun.
I mean, they go hand in hand. So, but that actually leads me to the point of our podcast where guns are expensive.
Podcast?
Yeah, it's going on right now.
Oh, jeez.
Guns are expensive.
Yes.
Holsters are expensive. Ammo is expensive. And Steve, you brought this episode idea up, so why don't you share?
So, man, sorry. Too much coronavirus. I was listening to another gun dedicated show the other day, and he had a gal on the show who's a retired nurse, and at first I thought that their conversation was going to go super anti-gun because she's a trauma nurse. She's seen what happens with gunshot wounds, and for sure I thought it was going to go anti-gun.
Right.
But instead she took a turn and was talking about how she's retired. She never thought about having a gun before. She grew up with guns in her house, but she just didn't want to have a gun in her home from her occupation. But seeing all the unrest that's going on, she finally feels the need or the desire to buy a firearm, but where she's retired and on a fixed income, she can't afford one.
That's a challenge.
That's what we decided to talk about is like, what if you can't afford a gun? What are your options?
Yeah, because that's a real thing. Or you might not just be able to even find a gun, and maybe you want to have something on you rather than nothing at this point, you know?
That's right.
So that's the subject of the episode today is some options that we can have besides firearms that would still work maybe for defensive situations, or maybe I thought too, talk about some maybe ways that to legally acquire a firearm that maybe most people buying their first gun haven't thought about.
That's true. There are some legal avenues that can be taken.
Yeah. So why don't we jump right into it, Steve? What did you think was the first thing that came to your mind if you couldn't afford a gun?
Well, I mean, we push it all the time, right? Training is always should be anyways at the forefront of what you're spending. I decided to look at some other things online just to see what other people are talking about, because I know we're not the first people to have this question.
Sure.
And there were a lot of interesting answers to alternatives of defense. But still, I would say getting some good training is still key. But it's not cheap. Right? It's still not going to be. It's still not going to be super affordable at times.
So that's the first thing that comes to mind when someone says they can't afford a gun?
Is what?
What you just said.
Well, that's the first thing that came to my mind was more training, whether it be hand-to-hand or something like that.
So then let's hear Mark's, and then I'll give you mine. Because I asked this on my Instagram page before we started today, and I got a lot of answers. And
really?
one of them was very prevalent, and I'm going to share it.
Interesting.
Ooh, interesting.
So yeah, the first one for me was, I thought of two. I guess I thought of a knife for maybe a potentially lethal carry, but also a less than lethal carry like pepper spray. A lot more affordable to have, to purchase, and also much more easy to carry, less, kind of maybe less responsibility, I guess, if you put it that way, because it isn't lethal and you can use it to get out of a sticky situation.
Yeah.
So I like those answers. Those are a little bit more defense minded than just training and like weapon wise. But the answer that I got the most, probably, I don't know, there's probably 100 responses that I got to the question, was there's no such thing if you make money that you can't afford a gun. There is a gun at every price point and every level.
Interesting. Okay.
So
yes,
those people,
if you can find them.
Hang on. So
okay,
those people that say I can't afford a gun, what they're really saying is I don't have the money available. So the $5 a day that I spend on coffee, the $7 a month I spend on Netflix, there's no such thing as not being able to afford something if you make any type of money. So you can go and get a high point for $150.
Interesting.
And those are never unavailable. Ever. You can go and get a Sky pistol for $200. The Taurus G2, which is a great gun.
That is actually a really good gun.
$197.
Never even heard of a Sky firearm.
What?
Oh, man. You obviously have not spent your time in the store like you should, Mark.
I have one.
Do you really?
We are going on a field trip.
Do I need to bring it next time I'm over?
I think you do. I'd love to shoot it.
Well, you say that now, but okay, I'll bring it.
Anyways,
actually, they're not terrible. And honestly, Nick, I didn't think about that. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's your priorities of spending habits, right?
So if you're thinking about a firearm and your feeling is that you can't afford it, it's more than just the cash that you're coming into play. You're avoiding buying it for some reason, because we can all come up with some way to come up with $200.
Right.
Granted, I know like everyone's going to have a reason why they can't come up with $200 because their dog's sick and they got to go to the vet and they need Diet Coke for the next week, whatever. Like there's an excuse, but if you really, really get down to it, if you feel like you need to defend yourself, there's a way for you to do that.
Yeah.
But like Mark said, pepper spray and knife, those are good alternatives. You can get into those for under $100, under $50. Like those are cheap alternatives. And then on top of that, there is self-defense training like martial arts or stuff like that, knife training that you can do without a gun. But if you really get down to it, there's a way for everyone to afford some sort of firearm.
Yeah, you just have to think that it might not be a Glock or, like you said, or even a Smith & Wesson or something like that, or an M&P, or you might have to go to a more budget-friendly firearms manufacturer. But yeah, you can still get something.
Absolutely. So they're just alternatives to think about. Like there's ways to get into firearms for very inexpensive. and they're not bad guns. I mean, I mentioned the Taurus G2. I sell a lot of holsters for that. I've shot that gun, have one in the shop. It's a good gun, and I see them at gun shows, $197.
That's pretty cheap.
And a lot of people bag on that G2. You're right. It actually is a pretty damn good gun for the price.
Well, let's put it next to a high point for price wise. Like,
yeah,
that's a 9-day difference.
And I would buy that Taurus any day of the week over a high point.
Yeah, so
Same.
I mean, it's there's an alternative. There's a solution there for everybody. It's just a lot of the gun guys don't want to admit that those less expensive guns, they're still relevant. They're still important. And the Sky pistol, the Sky mission is to get a good quality gun in the price point that everyone can afford. And that's their mission. I don't remember the owner's name, but he left Glock and designed that pistol with that in mind. An inexpensive quality firearm.
It's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll bring. I picked up a Sky for a ridiculous amount of money. Like, it was stupid for me not to buy it. Let's put it that way. And it's not the most glamorous pistol. It's not the most comfortable handgun. But I ran a couple mags through it without any issues. It ran just fine.
So I'll say this: I had a Sky pistol come into the custom shop 2 weeks ago, and it had a factory-mounted red dot.
Really?
Yep.
Huh. So really, it's just gun people probably have to get off of their high horse, and if they don't have the funds for a premium handgun, you have to just kind of find something.
So I'm of the mindset, and I'm sure that Steve is the same, that a quality gun is the best option. Like, sure. we all want something that's high end, it's the best of the best. And as gun people, I said this last time I was on here with you guys, I find as gun people, as a whole, we alienate people who are new to the industry. Yeah. We unintentionally talk down. We talk with language that they might not understand, and I think we scare away a lot of potential gun people who haven't really gotten in yet. Like, when I got into firearms, I knew nothing about shooting sports. I knew very little about concealed carry. I mean, I knew about Glocks because that's all everyone ever talked about. But as I get deeper into it, I understand that the new people who are going to carry this pro Second Amendment cause down the road, and we need to make sure not to alienate those people. And so if they have to, wherever you have to start, that's where you should start, even if it's with a high point. I don't know. I was telling someone, it might have been here, it might have been somewhere else, but my best friend from high school, we've been friends for 20 years. He called me a couple years ago. He was super excited. He's like, man, I just bought my first handgun. And I'm like, God, you're 30 years old and you just bought your first handgun? We grew up in the country. Like, what the heck, man? But he was super excited. He wanted a holster. And he's like, I go, what'd you get, man? He's like, man, I bought a used High Point 45. And I instantly felt my heart sink. And I was like, what? But he was super jacked about it. He got into it. He bought the gun for $95 from his buddy. And I had to remember, I was that new guy in the gun industry and didn't understand. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with owning a high point. At least you own a gun. At least you're exercising your right. It's a cool thing. And then I built him up into getting something else and getting something else, and slowly now he's not a gun enthusiast, but he owns 7 or 8 pistols now. And every time he runs to the store in Utah, he lives right down the street from Ready Gunner in Utah. And Neil down there has taken care of him 3 or 4 times. And I've called down and said, hey, this is what he's looking for. Can you help him get it?
Nice.
That's what you got to do sometimes to ease people into it.
Well, and to your point too. Oh, go ahead.
It wasn't even a financial thing why he bought that gun. It was that's what was available to him. That's what he saw. He could afford to buy something better, but why would you spend money on something you don't understand?
Right.
That was actually going to be my next point, was that maybe if it's your first gun, even during normal circumstances, it might even make more sense to buy a gun that isn't, the most expensive or isn't necessarily premium, because you can at least learn how a gun operates. And you can find out if you like shooting, like concealed carrying, all that without too much money into it. Nick and we had talked a couple weeks ago about, a lot of people not even knowing if they want to conceal carry, if they want to be gun people before they put a lot of money into it. So it makes more sense to buy a gun for maybe $150, $200, $300 rather than spending $500, $600, $700 on a gun.
And this kind of brings up an interesting conversation. I was just kind of listening and thinking while Nick was talking, and maybe we could call it like pistol privilege or something, because we get to the point, and you're absolutely right, Nick. We get to the point where we've been in the industry a long time. We work our way through guns. I remember my first AR compared to, ones that I build, or my first handgun to how many I got now.
Undisclosed
and you're
number.
right. Like things get better because a couple of factors. My financial situation's improved, and my understanding of firearms has come exponentially. And we talked about not long ago 5 million first-time gun owners in just this year alone. And you're right. We tend to alienate, whether on purpose or unknowingly, alienate a lot of these people in the community, these new people in the community, because we'll be belittling, high points or making fun of their gear, when we should be coaching and teaching and helping them understand the why, and then, helping them develop in their journey.
And that's exactly it. So I go into the range lot. Independence, indoor shooting. Imagine that. So I spend probably 1 to 2 days a week out there shooting now. And at least one of those times I'm taking someone with me to go shooting. And I recognize that I bring my guns, they bring their pistol. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's not. But anytime that I'm talking to somebody who's thinking about getting into a gun, especially female shooters or guys who want to get their wife into shooting, and I always get the question, what gun should I buy? And my response is always, I don't know. What guns have you shot? And so my response to that is always, go to the range, go to the counter, test shoot some of the, what is there, like 50 guns in there that you can shoot? Find a couple of guns, shoot a few rounds through 5 or 6 different guns, and find what one you feel the most comfortable with. Even if you don't know how to shoot well, there's going to be a difference in how the M&P feels versus the Glock, how the Taurus feels versus the Sky. Maybe I shoot the Sky pistol better than the Taurus, but they're in the same price point, and you can look at it that way and kind of walk through. For $100 in ammo, you can test out 5, 6, 7 guns and figure out which one you should get, and then start at whatever price point you can afford. And as you get more proficient, upgrade. We take guns in on trade at the store. People are always willing to buy, sell, and trade. Like, if you can't afford to keep that gun, just like a car, you get the gun you can afford. You keep it until you have a little more money. You trade it in on the next thing up. Like, that's the way I explain it to people. Is it's like a car. Like, you wouldn't buy the car that the salesman tells you to buy just because he told you to buy it.
Right.
You want to get in. You want to kick the tires. You want to walk around it. You want to you want to test drive it. You want to look at the reviews online, and then you're going to get whatever you can afford. Because I like to look at Lamborghinis. I can't afford one. I can't even afford to go to the dealership and kick the tires. So
right.
That stays in the online dream category. And then I go down to the Kia dealership and I kick the tires, and I'm like, I might settle with a Ford. But
that's smart. Well, and you brought up a good point too, is that's another thing that I was going to say is maybe if you can't afford a brand new gun, You can afford a used gun, or you could put one on layaway. There's a couple different options there that I think a lot of people don't know about, where, maybe, like you said, maybe you have a trouble coming up with $200 all in one shot, or $300 all at once. Having something on layaway, you can put a little bit towards a firearm, and that'll hold it for you, and then nobody else can take that from you, or buy it out from under you if you're at a reputable dealer. And as long as you make the payments within the allotted time, then you've got one, and then it's kind of on your to-do list to save for that.
And one thing that I always try to teach with our employees when I was really managing the floors over there was, we'll work with you on layaways. Like, it's not like, oh, your 30 days is up and you still owe us money, pay it now, or you lose everything.
Right.
No, we don't play that game. We understand if there's a legitimate circumstance that comes up, we will work with you, but unless some of it's your attitude when you come in or make that phone call. But we've been known more than once. I know personally, I've worked with people with guns on layaway that they were struggling to get it paid off in time or whatever. We'll work with you.
Well, I seem to remember the last time Steve was here and he was in the store buying up all the used guns. He missed out on a Glock 43 for $250.
I wish I would have bought that gun.
Man.
So there are deals to be had, and they're in the store. They're not just, you don't have to search too hard. You just have to keep watching. So if you have to get into what us enthusiasts would call a budget gun, if that's where you got to start, you could always trade that in when you find the right deal in the used counter.
Yep.
And then I'll come buy the used budget gun because I'll take all of them. I don't care what they are.
Oh, I'm not too proud. And we've talked about this
over quality.
That's right. And we've talked about this before. Most people do not shoot the guts out of their guns, their handguns. Most people. So I'm not scared to buy used guns. I actually, like you, I look forward to the used guns because I see potential. Like, I see a diamond in the rough sometimes. And usually it starts out with me justifying, oh, you know what, if I do this and that, I can turn that gun and make some money. But really what happens is I do this and that to the gun and it stays in my safe.
That was 2 gun safes ago, right?
You're far more correct in that assumption than you think.
But yeah, I mean, you don't always have to go to the brand new gun section. You can go to the used guns and see what there is, and maybe just make a point of going to the shop once or twice a week or whatever and seeing, because usually when there's a good deal somewhere, it's going to disappear pretty fast as well.
Well, and let's be real for a second too. Like, we are not the only shop in town, and there's also that. And if you don't live in Boise or the valley there, or maybe you live in a different state, there's more. Well, hopefully, there's more than one firearms dealer in town. And I honestly don't blame people if they find a better deal somewhere. I mean, we've got great customers I've talked to that said, hey, you had this gun for this price, but I went over here and they took another $20 off. I don't fault people for trying to save money. And hell, if you find a good deal, it's a good deal, right? So
sure.
Don't necessarily be stuck to one gun store. And like I say, we understand if you find a better deal somewhere else, but you can come shoot it in our range for sure.
That's true. And that's the thing, is that if price is your absolute biggest concern, it does benefit you to shop around.
Mm-hmm.
All I want to leave this on. You don't have to buy the gun that the guy behind the counter tells you that you need.
Yeah, sure.
Honestly, you shouldn't.
I've been preaching this for years, and I had a woman the other day that was asking me about a gun, and she wants me to take her to the store and show her some of them. And she's like, well, my dad told me that I might get a revolver. And I said, what are you going to use it for? What's the purpose of it? Do you plan on carrying it? Is it for home defense? Like, what do you want? And she's like, I just want to keep it at home. And I'm like, I think you should get a Glock 17 with 20 round mags and a flashlight mounted to it. Yeah. And she's like, don't you think that's overkill? I said, no, because I don't think you should ever have to reload.
Yeah.
Fair point.
So as long as you learn how to shoot it, like, there's no such thing as that's too much gun, unless it's like a 44 Magnum or something.
Well, and it's okay to have ammo left over in the magazine.
Yeah.
That is true.
But you know what sucks is when somebody sells you on getting a J frame, you only have 6 rounds and there's 2 attackers, and you got scared and you fired all 6 into the first one, and the next attacker's still ready to go.
Yeah, and then you're done.
Well, it only takes 1 round.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've never had to shoot anybody, but I'm pretty sure that even with my training that I'm going to shoot more than once because I'm going to be scared.
Right. It depends on what your stress level's at the time.
Well, because of my training, I'll probably shoot more than just 1 round.
Yeah. You know what I tell my mom, who has a Glock 17 with a 20-round mag and a Surefire X300 sitting next to her bed, is shoot until the threat stops coming towards you. Mm-hmm. And then do the same to the next one.
It's good advice.
That's right.
Basic, but that's the way it should be.
And she is not a gun person. She has the basic level of training to defend herself if someone comes into her home, but that's the only reason that she wanted a gun.
Well, but 20 rounds, like you said, is better than 6 or 5 for that matter.
Yep.
So the other thing I thought about too is that maybe if you're not comfortable with the firearm first, and maybe you can't afford a gun, but you don't have any firearm experience, is to take an intro to firearms class. There are a lot of places that, offer those. You don't even need a gun. You can use one of their rental guns. I believe our First Shots class is much like that, where you don't even need to have a gun. You can actually shoot a firearm for the first time, see if you even like it, because it may be something that you might not want to do.
Yeah.
I think that's important, and I think that's something that Mark, me and you talked about when you were in my shop the other day, was maybe concealed carry is not for everyone. Maybe you want a gun, but just like I said about my mom, she has a gun, but she doesn't want to carry it. It's for home defense only, and it's only after I explained to her why I felt it was important that she finally agreed to do it and get the training. But maybe concealed carry isn't for everybody. But maybe you want to own the gun because it's your right to have it, and you just want to have it to go shooting at the range, or to have it for that home defense situation, or maybe you just want to have it just to have it. I know Steve has plenty of guns he has just to have.
Very true.
No, they all have a purpose.
At least they all have a place. I know that for sure.
There's always room for adoption in my family, so
you never have too many.
There's always room for one more.
But yeah, maybe like you said, maybe you don't like concealed carrying, and you found that out after you've bought a $700 gun and you've bought a $100 holster, or a very nicely priced Hoftac holster.
See, and I've been through multiple classes, and I'm sure, Steve, you've instructed multiple classes where by the end of the class, there's a new gun owner, or maybe even someone who's owned a gun for a long time but doesn't shoot a lot, and decided that they needed that permit, and they got through the class and they said, this just isn't for me.
Yeah, I've seen it happen.
I don't think that I feel comfortable with the responsibility of having a concealed carry permit, because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it, and most of it is put on you on your own. I mean, we're not responsible for that until something happens, and then all of that responsibility comes back onto you as the concealed carrier. And when you educate people on that, then they start to realize, like, you know what, maybe I don't feel comfortable carrying a weapon that could take someone's life because I don't think I could do it, or I don't know if I could make that distinction. Right. And that's fine. Not everybody is capable and needs to be capable of doing that.
And I think that's where being experienced gun owners and helping people on their journey, I think that's an important part, not giving them false expectations, or giving them the information that we think we want them to have, and then bypassing important stuff. Because you're right, there are people out there. I've had people in classes where it's like, no, I don't think I'm ready for this.
And see, my firearms journey is totally different than yours, Steve. It's totally different than Mark's. Like, we have 3 different real perspectives, because you're an instructor, I'm not. Mark is probably the newest to the firearms industry out of the three of us.
Sure.
I can tell by the holsters that I've made for him. I'm just kidding, man.
And
Fair enough.
Carrying a Walther for so many years.
Well, I've changed my tune now.
And I say that because I don't own a lot of guns. I have guns, but I'm not an enthusiast in firearms. I carry my first pistol, my first handgun. That's the gun that I carry every day. I've cycled through some. I've tried different guns. Obviously, I have experience with thousands of different handguns, but I still carry the same gun that was given to me when I got my permit, and I've carried it for years. It's a Gen 2 Glock 19.
Old reliable.
Yeah, it was made in 1987.
Wow, that's ancient. That's older than me.
Yeah, it's a year older than me.
You guys are so young.
I didn't know we were the same age.
But like I said, all of our journeys are different, and so to try and force my vision of what concealed carry is onto someone else, that's not the way it is. And as educators, because I'm not a firearms instructor yet, but I consider myself an educator when it comes to concealed carry and some other things.
Or at least an influencer, at the minimum, an influencer.
Don't you have to get paid to be an influencer? I've never gotten paid.
Not
necessarily.
Internet influencer.
Oh, you mean old school? I'm not that old. I don't know what that means.
Well, dang millennials, anyways.
Yeah. So I would press upon anybody who's talking to somebody new to firearms and comes up against, what if I can't afford a gun? You have to guide them through their own journey. So if it's getting a knife first, if it's getting pepper spray first, practice carrying a knife every single day. And if you had to, would you use that knife in a deadly manner to save your life?
Right.
And a lot of us will say, absolutely, I would defend my life and my kids and my wife with deadly force. But like I told Mark when he was in the shop, there's days where I'm just not feeling it. And when I go to put my gun on, I ask myself, do I feel like I can be responsible with this today? And there's some days where I put it back in the safe and I say, you know what, this isn't happening today.
Yeah.
My mind's not there. The clarity's not there for me to make a life or death decision for me or another person. And that's important to understand.
Well, and that's the big choice that we all have to make anyways as concealed carry holders, whether it be a gun, a knife, a pen, whatever. We have to make that cognitive leap saying, yeah, I'm willing to do this. And I worry that so many people out there think they've made that mental leap, but they really haven't.
Well, I think the problem is the mental leap, like the financial leap and the mental leap are two different things, where for some people it's easy to spend a few $100s and get a gun, or maybe somebody who's untrained and doesn't have a lot of money does, buy, let's say, an entry-level firearm or a budget-friendly firearm, and they think it's like a magical talisman or it's going to solve all their problems. I think there's a lot more that it takes to make that mental leap, that you can spend a lot less money to find out before plunking down the money for a gun,
Yeah.
I think that the statement of not being able to afford a firearm is more of a personal thing, that it's, if I don't know if I can afford a firearm, one, because I'm not a gun owner already, and two, because I don't have the knowledge and experience of what it means to be a gun owner and to carry a gun. So I'm already a little scared to carry a gun. Maybe I don't want to find the way to actually have the money to buy it. I don't know if that made sense.
Like it's almost like an excuse instead of an actual problem.
Absolutely. And it might be a legitimate problem to the person saying it, but there's always more behind that. Why do you think you don't have the money? Well, I have to pay for this, this, and this. Okay, well, I bet we can find the money. So what will the next objective be? Maybe it's I'm not comfortable carrying a gun. That's going to be more of a deciding factor than the actual $150 that you have to shell out. It's going to be the fear of actually carrying the gun.
Right. As I think there's a fair amount of hesitation. I think if you've never bought a gun before, maybe you haven't owned one before, even just going to a gun shop, I think there's a little bit of hesitation there. And, maybe some people think it's, you go in there with $200 or $300 and that's just not enough, period. Or that they're going to spend more than they want to. And so they just kind of avoid the whole situation.
And I think that you don't have to do it all at once. We talked about layaway. You can buy the gun, you can take the training, like you can do it in steps. So
right.
What I would say to the trauma nurse that was in that interview is go to the range, find somebody that can help you get the information that you need, and then let's find out what you need. Because if you're a nurse, I'm telling you right now, you better be responsible enough to be able to buy a $150 pistol.
Well, she was retired. She was on a fixed income, to be fair.
So that is a consideration to make.
And maybe she should have planned her finances out a little bit better. But who am I to judge?
Yes. So like I said, there's more to everyone's story, and it's important to understand, like, when people. Even you take the people who are anti-gun and anti-machine gun. We've all seen the videos of the people who are scared shitless of AR-15 assault rifles. Yeah. They go into the range and they shoot a machine gun and they're practically peeing their pants with excitement. Yeah. So as scared as they were going into it, it's finding out what makes the most sense for them, what gets them excited about being a gun owner. And once you're excited about being a gun owner, you turn into me, who I had one gun, now I have 20, and I keep trading them out to get the next one that I want. I look at them like cars. Like, I don't have a huge collection like Steve, but I have some really nice guns.
Hey, I don't even have a huge collection. I lost most of them.
I've bought some really, really expensive guns, and then I've lost excitement for them, and I trade them for something else. And I take a loss on them sometimes. Not as bad as you do a new vehicle, I can tell you that.
Hey, I'll be real. Like, some of my favorite guns are some that I've paid the least amount of money for. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I usually get fixated on something. I'm really excited about it. I get it. I shoot it a few times, and then it sits around. I'm like, there's no reason to have it if it's just going to sit there. So I go trade it on the next thing that I'm excited about.
And that's something, too, I think it's a great point, is that even if you can only afford one gun and you don't like the one that you have, you can trade it in to get something else. Like Nick said, it's not a one-and-done thing.
Right. That's true.
So, well, I think we covered that better than I thought we would.
But did it go in a different direction than we thought it would?
I think so, but you can always count on Mr. Hoffer to help make that happen.
Yeah, I don't mind. The thing I like doing, though, is, and maybe people don't like it, I like having conversations, because I think it's real. You know what I mean? It's not like we're just spewing sales calls and quotas or whatever, you know.
Surprisingly, you're not saying just buy a Glock, just buy a Glock.
No, yeah. And if you don't buy that Glock, it leaves more for me.
That is true.
I'm going to leave this conversation with, I think everybody should buy an STI Staccato for $2,700. If you can't afford that, you shouldn't be a gun owner. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I don't want the Staccato, but I would take an old school STI Trojan any day of the week.
That's
it. As just a shooter that I'm not scared about. Yeah.
What I'm really hoping is, after I guided this conversation in a different direction, you guys have me back next week.
Oh, you'll be back.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I'm on, what do they call it? Waivers.
Oh, like a probationary period?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually a good point. Maybe we can ask the listeners what they think of having Nick Hoffer on all the time. That's
probably a good decision on your guys'.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess we'll end on that. I mean, send us an email. Maybe we missed something, or maybe there's another cheaper legal way to get a firearm that we missed, or an alternative. Maybe if you A, don't feel like carrying, or B, have some financial obligations that don't allow you to get a firearm. Let us know. Podcast@iishooting.com, or you can find us at Range Minded Podcast and on Facebook and the Instagram. And let us know what you think of Nick Hoffer. Maybe you'll see him around more often if you guys like him.
Yeah, we kind of like him.
Here's what I'm going to leave this with. I challenge all the listeners to share Range Minded Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And if you don't like what I have to say, DM me directly and tell me what you didn't like.
There we go. That's a bold man right there. So, well, I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Heck yeah, be safe. Take somebody shooting.
Absolutely. See you guys on the range.
See ya.
Alrighty, guys.
Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.